Hello, I'm Dr. Azam Garaman. In this presentation, I would like to focus on just one aspect of what I discussed in an earlier lecture, which was called How to Die Well. If you recall, we discussed how the ancient culture's model of life was built on an unknowable center that unfolds into two poles, and their view of life rested on this polarity. These two poles were opposites, but complementary, not contradictory. And that's a major point. They viewed these as complementary. One needed the other to complete the other. So they were not enemies, but allies. And life and harmony was maintained as these poles unfold, and reconcile in a new way, in a spiral way, throughout the growth and decay stages of life. Today, I just want to focus on how this polarity shows up in our interpersonal relationships. In all aspects of interpersonal relationships. Actually, it shows up in just about everything we do in life. How we drive, how we eat, how we furnish our homes, how we relate to each other. But before we want to talk about the big picture, how to bring peace to the country or to the world, let's focus on our one-on-one relationships with ourselves and with the other. I think that's a more profitable approach because that's something that as a person we can do something about. Most people have the idea that a good relationship is 50-50. I don't. I think that a good relationship is 100-100. So what does it mean for me to psychologically hold and carry my 100% in a relationship? And what does this polarity have to do with my relationship with a mate or child or brother, sister, or family or neighbor? What does that have to do with all this? In a nutshell, it means how do I embody traits and qualities that are opposite to each other? So first I need to understand what each pole is made of, and then how to embody it throughout my growth in life. How to live out of that awareness as I relate to you. It's much more tempting to pick sides and vacillate between the two poles, one at a time. We get tousled back and forth. I'm either nice or mean. I either want to be by myself or I can't leave you alone. I either want to be independent and never ask for anything or just want everybody to take care of me. We're not talking about compromise here. The real growth is not just compromise and settling for something in the middle. The real growth comes when we hold the tension between the two poles, which feels crucifying, until a third, a new one emerges that really does not look like either of these. It's almost like a chemical reaction. Table salt, for example, there's sodium, which is actually a shiny metal, and chlorine gas. But when they form a compound, here you get table salt that does not look at all like sodium or like chlorine gas. It's a whole new thing. I'm saying all this because we're talking about something that is awfully abstract, and I'm trying to set the stage to make it more uh, accessible, because it is so important in today's culture for us to have an understanding of how to how to live with each other's differences. I really think the time has come for our culture that is ready to address this issue. We want somebody else to think like us. We need to learn how to allow for differences, and that requires a good understanding of these poles. So, what does it mean for me to hold the tension of these two poles simultaneously? Let me give you an example. Can I be both kind and angry at the same time if I'm speaking with you? Not 3 days later. It's very easy to be angry and then nice 3 days later. At the same time, can I talk in a manner that is both, let's say, vulnerable and strong? It's very hard. So let's take a closer look at these poles. Ancient cultures had given names broadly to these poles. For example, in the Chinese culture, these poles were called yin and yang. In ancient Iran, for example, I'm talking about 3,600, 3,700 years ago, as these poles unfolded, instead of yin and yang, they were called non-being and being. For those of you who speak Farsi, nazendegi va zendegi. For us, in the American culture, the two terms that would come close would be unconscious and consciousness. Same idea. Now, we know so little, really, about, first of all, how consciousness develops, but we know so little about how a human infant even comes to understand and experience differences and polarities. I mean, think about it. Anything that we conjure is going to be a guess at its best. But let's do that. It appears that man, woman, or mother, father is the first, among the first experience of differences that a human being has. And for that reason, it becomes the prototype, a template for how we experience other polarities and differences throughout life. So it's very important. For example, in some cultures, the sky is masculine, the earth is feminine. In some cultures, it's the other way around. Well, what does that mean? What I'm trying to say is how a human being names and relates to something that is more remote and distant is often viewed as masculine, and that which is more immediate and near is experienced as feminine. It is what it is. I'm not judging it good or bad. I'm just trying to describe how we think it is experienced psychologically. So for this reason, it's easy to see that if the masculine feminine is the early prototype, how then subsequent polarities are experienced in those terms. The problem begins, I think, when a cultural misperception corrupts this symbolic masculine feminine formula. You see, once an error gets introduced into this formula, then that since that key symbol is used for other differences, then that problem replicates. And I really think this is what is happening, at least in our culture today. The key symbol through which we see other differences, spirit, matter, birth, death, good, evil, high, low, all of that gets then corrupted to some extent. Well, also consciousness, unconscious, that gets greatly affected also. And then what happens is that the process of differentiation and reconciliation of these opposites that has to go on throughout life and throughout our growth then gets complicated. And that's what I think is happening. What is this error now? We seem to equate feminine with female and with a sweet mother or nurturing mother. And that's exactly what we should not do. And even more problematic than that, we seem to equate masculine with a man and equate it with patriarchy. This mistake pins a woman against a man, pins them against one another, and it lulls us women into thinking that because we are not male, that we do not contribute to the patriarchal attitude. Oh, because we are women. It leaves us off the hook. And that's not correct. That's not psychologically correct. Because we do play a role in it, a negative role in it. We have got to clear this confusion. Frankly, I would not want to be a male in this culture at this time. I don't know. I don't see a path for a man to fully emerge as a man and develop the full range of his masculine archetype without being labeled as a toxic or misogynist or sexist. On the other hand, how can a woman respect her intuition and feelings and not be labeled as emotional or out there? Can a woman say, I understand all the reasons why you would like me to do this, but I have a feeling it's not the right decision for me? Can you imagine a woman say that in a boardroom? The unfortunate thing then is that men and women end up blocking each other's transformational and psychological work. We women need men to become fully men, as I will discuss in a minute. And men need us women to do our 100% and become conscious women. Otherwise, neither can become a full length, enlarged mirror for the other. I much prefer to use the terms yin and yang rather than masculine, feminine, for the reason that I'm discussing. it does not have that same confusion because it applies to all polarities, not just sexuality. I could also use the terms non-being and being, but I think that kind of freaks people out, non-being. So I'll stay with yin and yang. Here's a simple visual aid. Uh, Yin and yang are abstract terms, they're words, okay? I'm trying to make them more accessible and bring them into the realm of our relationships, something very, something we run into every day, okay? This is not an abstract university kind of a talk. I want this to be real. Now, no one knows really what yin and yang are, so this is a model. It's a way of explaining something. So here is a fan. Someone gifted this to me some time ago. It's a fan. And I know this is a very simple tool, but please bear with me. So let's say this is the center. Remember I said there's a center and then the poles unfold. Okay, so here's the center. And let's say as the poles unfold, this represents yin, and let's say this represents yang, okay? And when poles unfold, life flows in between. So the first half of life, this expands, and second half of life, really these polarities all reconcile eventually, and end in death. So yin and yang. The yin archetype, or the archetype of the unconscious, represents the early stage of life where unconsciousness predominates consciousness. Consciousness has not formed yet, really, in an infant yet. We don't really know how it forms, but at some point we know that it develops. Obviously, any parent sees that. Yin is not a single point. It's a spectrum. It's a spectrum of traits that either a man or a woman can embody. That's the point. That's why it's so much better to use yin than feminine. It broadly develops into two clusters. You know, this is really a neat tool, actually, a visual aid, because it already shows the two parts. I did not plan on this, but it works very well. I want to say primitive, but let's say the initial or the very young aspect has been called different names. It has been called maternal, collective, or static aspect of yin. Okay, collective, static, or maternal. It's an alphabet soup. It's completely undifferentiated. It's like a swamp. It hangs on to anything that is born of it. Okay, very possessive. It does not want to let go of it. That's why it's called static. It stays. It can become stagnant. Love you to death. Have you heard that? I love you to death. What does that mean? Oof. Well, you can understand what it means. I love you to death. It holds on to everything that is born from it. You cannot, I love you so much, you cannot possibly reject me. See, that's very possessive. Does not allow the freedom for the other to go away, to move. Undifferentiated. A person who very much is dominated by this part of the archetype thinks we're all the same. We're all the same. How can we all be the same? I mean, look at the body. How can a blood cell be the same as a brain cell as the same as a lung cell or a spleen cell. There's no differentiation. No differentiation when someone thinks we're all the same. We may be all made of the same particles, but we're not all the same. But that differentiation is lacking in this type. In dreams, this part shows up as spider web. It entangles, stagnant water like pond, tomb, grave, because it gives life and it also takes back. The other part of yin, this is important. The other part of yin is the transformational aspect of yin. This part, there's more movement toward the other. Notice, this part of yin is coming a little closer to the yang part. So there's more movement. It's like this part, there is more awareness of the other. It's more individual, less collective. But it is still for the sake of merging. Yin wants to merge, wants things to be the same, man or woman. If I'm arguing with you and I'm predominantly here, I want to pull you to think the same way as I do. I want to, in fact, even bully you, because the more you are like me, the better it is, I think. You see that? So there is more movement toward the other, but it's still not for the sake of allowing differences between us. So it's not the I, thou that Martin Buber talks about. It's for the sake of emotionality and social support. There's not a lot of depth to it. And you know what I see in working with women patients is something is beginning to not work in their girlfriend relationships sometimes anymore. They want more depth. They want a little more room to be who they are and not just all be the same in a book club or in a group. And a woman has to learn how to allow for these differences in a healthy way. A point I want to make is that we should not confuse predominance of a trait with consciousness. I, as a female, have a maybe predominantly female and predominantly yin, but that does not mean that I am conscious of the full range of yin. In fact, I may be quite unconscious. But because I look female, and again, because of the mistake we make in our culture, we think, oh, I'm so feminine. I may not be feminine at all. Not in the sense of a conscious yin. So predominance is not the same thing as consciousness. And a man, same thing, may be predominantly male, but he may not be fully conscious of his yang. The other pole, the yang archetype, also is a spectrum. And one aspect of it is called the dynamic, and then the other one is the static or more reflective part. Notice this part of yin begins to move a little toward yang, and this part of yang begins to move a little toward yin. It's very desirable. These two parts often go together. I usually say they tangle together, and these two parts tango together. These two parts are very desirable if we can develop them. So the dynamic aspect of yang, that's um, developing a will, developing ambition, goals, ascending in life. It's very necessary to have that, developing an ego. This can be uh, uh, the attributes or movement, moving away from the center, penetrating. It's more phallic energy. It can be even shattering and penetrating. It strives for individual separation. Yin wants to merge, Yang wants individual separation, differentiation. It's absolutely necessary to develop this, to adapt to a culture, learning, uh, yeah, learning, adapting to a culture. The still aspect of Yang appears as reflective, um, contemplative, law in the best sense, discernment, reason, discernment, this and not that. But you see, this aspect of Yang never shuts out this aspect of Yin. The two need one another. The still static part of Yang is what Jung referred to as logos. He didn't develop it too much. He didn't develop eros either. Others have had to develop it, but it really is time in our culture where this wants to become developed. I really sense that. Remember earlier I said that how polarities are experienced becomes a prototype for all other differences. So let's talk about a psychological model of how this develops in a human. I think if we can do that, then it might be possible for each of us to sort of find ourselves on the map and see whether there is an area that needs to be developed in us, maybe with some help from a therapist or from a partner or friends, or a lot of it can even be done by yourself. But it's good to know what might need some more support and strengthening. So you all have heard that in the first half of life, the primary caregiver, let's just assume it's the mother. It doesn't have to be, but mothers get blamed for everything. Let's just assume it's the mother, that she looms large in the psyche of a baby. Okay, large, very large. And how that bond develops between the infant and the primary caregiver, say the mother, that has enormous implications with how subsequent bondings and relationships are formed later in life. This is not causal, but it is highly influential. I'm talking now about the first year or so of development. Actually, the psyche of the baby, the infant, and the mother are still one, has not really separated into a separate being. It doesn't even refer to itself as a separate person till maybe year and a half. Even then, it calls himself Johnny or Mimi or whatever. Later, maybe by age 2 or so, it begins to refer to itself as I, because as it moves to room to room to room, it recognizes that I'm the same person, right? So then it begins to not refer to himself as Jimmy, but says, I want to do this. That's the beginning of a consciousness of a separate ego from the mother. from the biological mother. The stages of growth, psychological growth, they are transpersonal. They're going to happen. And what flips the switch on or off, it does not depend on a person or the culture. They're transpersonal. Now, there comes a time when this child has to move away from the mother and enter kind of the paternal world and develop an ego and a will and begin to compete and grow up. Many cultures have very well defined initiation rites and all of that for this stage. I don't think we have one, but psychologically it needs to happen. See, staying with the mother represents bliss, okay, because you're totally taken care of. Happiness is bestowed on you. It's moving away from the mother that represents risk. That's why it's called the hero's journey, because it represents risk and suffering. And we must go through that. Not going through that creates enormous problems later in life. We'll discuss a few of them. If we do not leave this realm of the static maternal and collective yin, if we do not leave the personal mother, then this bonding becomes bondage. Then we get fixated. It's like milk turns sour. Nurturing becomes possessiveness. You see, things, it develops a negative aspect. It becomes envy, becomes possessiveness, becomes devouring. All the flip side of what was a positive attribute. Adisere means is the root of addiction. You see, that means still being an enslaved to this part of the yin, to this part of mother. I believe that it may have something to do with the dynamic of a sex addiction, for example. We don't have time to go through that, but I believe that that's an important dynamic to keep in mind for people who are addicted to sex or porn. Many mothers can nurture their children very well, and just about everyone wants to also protect their children adequately. But how to protect the child at the right time? A good mother knows how to protect the child and then deliver up the child to a supportive father figure and not keep the child for herself. That's really the definition, the ultimate definition of a good mother. What does that mean? And let me give you an example that was really eye-opening for me. I have a little puppy, a little Cavalier King Charles. Her name is Lily. And when she came, when they delivered her, she was 6 or 7 weeks old, very little. And this was during COVID. So not a lot was happening. And she hadn't had all her shots yet, so we couldn't even really socialize or go out very much on the street and stuff with her. I had a trainer, and he said, you know, there is a window within which dogs need to be socialized and see other dogs, because she wasn't seeing other dogs. So he was a trainer of dogs, assistant dogs, like guide dogs for the blind and others. So he said, I'm going to bring 2 of my dogs one at a time. They're well trained, and it would be a good experience, good first experience for Lily. So he brought a big, well, a full-size golden retriever, a gentle giant, really. And Lily had never seen a big dog like that, certainly not inside our yard. And she was so scared. She just curled up next to my feet and she just peed. She was so scared she peed. And I I wanted to pick her up and just rescue her so badly. And I kept saying, what should I do? Should I pick her up? And my trainer was just standing there like, wow, this is all right on schedule. He was really enjoying this whole scene. His golden retriever was just there, wagging the tail, and Lily was just petrified. He said, no, she knows what she needs. She came to you, and she's feeling safe right next to you. If you want, you can squat, bend, but she knows what she needs. That was very hard for me. I wanted to pick her up and put her in my arms. I thought that's what real protection was from her fear of this other dog. But you see, had I picked her up, I would have done it for me. And then Lily would have never crossed that threshold within herself to find the safety within herself. She knew what to do to feel safe. And as long as I really stayed with her physically and emotionally, that was the protection that she needed. Wow, that was such a lesson for me. That was such a lesson to join someone in the feeling that they are having, whether it's sadness, fear, happiness, to join them psychologically, not to take it away, but to really join them. So a good mother knows how to protect a child in a way that I described. What the child needs is a appropriate balance between the mother and the father, a good fit. What I'm saying is, if the mother is appropriate, for example, but the father is too strong, too dominant, then the transition, this delivering up, does not take place very successfully. Or if the mother is too weak and the father is weak also, that's not a good combination either. So there has to be a good balance between the two and a good fit. Otherwise, the transformation from yin to yang doesn't take place, and the child stays fused with the mother. The stage of delivering up to this stage is key. This has to happen. Why? Because this transformational aspect of yin has got to be extricated and come out from under the dominion of the mother. Both a male and a female have got to do this to get unfused from the mother. Otherwise, it poses problems for both male and female. What kind of a problem does it pose for a man? What happens when a man stays fused with a mother? It poses several problems, all of which usually manifest as fear. Well, one of them is, we say he's a mama's boy. Another variation is when he becomes a Don Juan and fears either this part of yin or the transformational aspect of yin in a woman. Another variation for a man is he can kind of go into hiding in what's called a normal relationship or even a normal marriage. But what's really normal means that the marriage or the relationship is pretty much this part only, not this part. So the transformational aspect of yin is kept outside of the marriage, and it's not part of the marriage because he has resisted that, the transformative part. Because you see, this quiets a man, it rocks his boat. So yes, theoretically it sounds good, but it's scary. So the transformational aspect is kept outside of the relationship, and it becomes what's called a marriage wrecker or a seductress. Same thing for a woman. A woman has got to extricate, with the help of yang, this aspect of the yin. Otherwise, she will remain fused with the mother. Although that is not as visible of a problem when you look at a woman. As I said, she could look, oh, very nice, very sweet, and all that, but she may be completely unconscious of her competitiveness, of her envy, of her possessiveness. She just appears sweet. The movement from yin to yang are different in some ways for a boy than a girl, or a man and or a woman. You see, when a boy is delivered up to the father world, the father and the boy have the same gender, and which is different than the mother. But for a girl, going into the yang archetype is of a different nature, because you see, she and the mother have the same gender. So leaving the mother in some ways for a girl is difficult, because it almost means like she has to leave her own essence behind. That's why I think in the mother-daughter relationships, the movement for a girl to unfuse herself from the mother can be guilt-producing. Like, I'm leaving my mother behind, I'm leaving a part of my own essence behind. It is necessary. It is really necessary. And I think in many ways, some of the mother-daughter relationships that are much more contentious for decades stem from this dynamic. It would be good to understand that and not, as mothers, retaliate against that. The danger for a girl in developing consciousness and moving to the yang archetype, the danger is that she could get lost in the yang archetype and identify with it. What that means is she becomes pseudo-masculine. I think somehow some of this really has happened a lot in this culture with the women, that in an attempt to develop their consciousness and maybe find a career and all of that, that they have identified with yang, with this aspect of yang, unfortunately. So they have become pseudo-masculine. She can end up self-alienated in a way, and lost. How do you know you're in the presence of a woman like that? Well, in an argument, she makes men bristle. She thinks like a man, but an inferior man, because she's not a man. Her creativity is like a man, not like a woman. The two are not the same. I'm sorry. The dynamic yang tailgates her mercilessly. She is always doing something. Even if she's sitting on the couch, she's not still. The tape is going. Oh, I need to do this. Oh, I have done this. Have I done this? The list. 15 seconds cannot go without inserting a word into it. There's very little space. See, this part has not developed very well. This woman has a difficult time receiving because she is not aware of her vulnerable side, of the side that can receive. So she wants to give, she wants to penetrate, she wants to be in charge, and quickly and unnecessarily takes charge. It doesn't have to. I see this so often, and it is such a pity. It really is. Second half of life demands something very different of a woman than a man. You see, a man who has managed to extricate the transformative aspect of yin, if he is lucky, and gets unfused from the mother, then can go on to the yang archetype, and if our culture allows to develop his full, embody the full length of yang archetype, that's a well-lived life for him. But for a woman, the second half of life is a little bit more complicated, because what happens for a woman is that she has to redeem herself from the dynamic aspect of yang, develop this aspect of yang, and then come back again to her own essence as a woman, as a conscious woman. I'm trying to say this is very subtle but very important. When a woman comes back to her own essence, the way she experiences yin, her yin, is very different from how the culture experiences it, and how she experienced herself through the eyes of a male. It is very different. You will know it. You will know it. You will know when you feel it. It is different. You come to your own essence. It's like you know who you are. You know who you are as a woman, as a conscious woman. Let me give you an example. Let's say this is a cup, okay? Let's say this was a ceramic cup, and it started out as a little lump of clay. And someone who knows how to make pots and cups made this. And the edges grow, and it becomes a cup, and the inside is empty. So I'm using two metaphors here, the yin and the yang. The yin is inside. The yang is the outer edges, okay, the form. But to a male, yin is nothing, is void. But when a woman comes back to her own essence, she does not experience this as nothing. This is the womb that gives birth to all creativity. This void is not nothing. This makes my cup. Without it, there is no cup. It may be no thing, but it is not nothing. So the experience of yin for a woman is very different than for a man. When a woman is conscious and comes back to her own essence, she appreciates a man for who he is, does not need to put him down, make him feel inferior, does not need to cut him in half and then expect him to stand tall next to her. How can he? She now respects him and respects herself. She does not fear him. And a man who has liberated the transformative aspect of yin from the mother and has developed full range of yang, he too is now ready to relate to a woman as a conscious thou. Their relationship now becomes a container, a vessel in a way, for holding the tension between all other polarities. They each become an enlarged, full-size mirror for the other. You see, projection is not a dirty word. Anything that I am not conscious of, I first see it outside of me in the other. And if my partner has done his work and is a full-length mirror for me, then I can successfully project the undeveloped part, which for me might be part of yang, onto him, and he can hold it and then allow me to withdraw my projection and then own it. Same thing the other way around. If I have done my work and I can stand as a full enlarged mirror for him, he can project an aspect of yin that he may not have developed very well. I can take that projection. I'm not going to get tangled up in it. I can let him project. And then at some point, he can withdraw the projection and he can embody it himself. It can become his experience. He doesn't need to project it onto me. That is a good relationship. I need the other. I need to help the other. And I need the help of the other. Once a gentleman from the audience asked me a very good question. He said, can you give a concrete example of what a conversation would be like between a conscious woman and a conscious man, as you describe as a full mirror? I was not ready for that question. It was a very good question. So this example came up for me. I said, let's say, to this gentleman, I said, let's say you and I are married and I'm pregnant and we go out to eat. We're at a restaurant and I see you are staring at the butt of a young waitress who is not pregnant, and I feel devastated. And now I could come home and I could just rip you. And then I could talk to all of my female friends and just develop lots of allies. But I could give you the silence treatment for a whole week. Now, if I'm aware of how I'm feeling, if I'm aware of what I need, let's say I'm a conscious woman, okay? If I'm aware of what I'm feeling and what I need from you, if I'm also aware of your vulnerabilities, so I don't need to exploit them and make you feel inferior, here's what I might say. I'd say, you know, I'm carrying our child. I feel fat. I have lost control of my body. I feel unattractive, and much of the time I don't even feel attractive to you anymore. And when I see you stare at that young waitress who's not pregnant, I don't even have words to describe how hurt I feel. It's as if I experience it as a betrayal to everything that has happened between us. And I want you to be more aware of how your behavior affects me. You see, there is no fight. I didn't need to break him. I tried to make him aware of something he may not have been aware of, which is how it might impact me as his partner when he does something very natural. He may look at many people. He may not have even thought much about it. We was just maybe staring for whatever reason. But of course, I experience it differently. And all I'm saying is, I want you to be aware of how it impacts me. I did not hold him responsible for my insecurities. He didn't have to compensate for that. I took ownership of that. I said, I feel fat. Now, let's take the other example. Let's say he is more conscious than I am, and he wants to bring up a grievance. Okay? Let's say you're upset with me for the way that I've been treating you. I told this gentleman. I could see you say something like this to me. You could say, as a man, he's saying, I want to please you. I want to make you happy. But honestly, I always seem to fall short. And nothing that I do seems to be good enough or make the mark. I don't know what to do. Give me a path. Show me. Tell me more of what you need specifically from me so that I do it. Again, there is no fight. He spoke in a kind and confident way. I will walk away from that saying, do I always criticize him? Heck yes. Do I make him feel inferior and not good enough? Yes. Oh, I do that. See, I have to live with that. I have to own that. He helped me become aware of something that I wasn't aware of in me. The rest of the work then is up to me. Like a good mirror, he showed something about me that I couldn't see in myself, like my backside. That's a good relationship. Thank you for listening.